Hey everyone, I'm Tim Moore here, reminding you that SportsSpeak is partnered with SeatGeek. SeatGeek is a one-stop shop for all tickets for sporting events, concerts, and much, much more. So if you use promo code SportsSpeak at checkout and you are a first-time user, you can get $20 off at purchase. With that being said, let's get back to the episode. However, SeatGeek, let there be live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 151 of Sports Speak. I'm Tim Moore. No Eddie Kalegi today. We'll have him back on the next episode. However, I'm joined with one of our continued Sports Speak contributors of Alec Crouthamel. And Alec, I'll tell you what, we're going to talk about baseball throughout this episode here this afternoon. By the way, a Friday afternoon here on Sports Speak. You'll probably see this, if not tonight, Friday night. On Saturday, before the AL and NLDS begin, before we get into the division series, let's just take a step back. Just a couple days ago, the wild card series. Are we surprised that we saw sweeps around the entirety of the American League and National League? Because I truly thought we'd get at least one 3-game series. But as the narrative really has been now throughout the last 2 seasons, it's just going to be very rare to see a 3-game series. And every team, the Rangers, the Twins, surprisingly getting their first wins in the playoffs since the year 2005, the Philadelphia Phillies and the Arizona Diamondbacks all winning their series. Are we surprised by that?
Not really, honestly. The Phillies sweeping the Marlins was not a surprise at all because they're just flat out a much better team than the Marlins. The Diamondbacks, I was a little surprised that they swept the Brewers, especially given their pitching. But they just got timely hits, got some good hits, got some runs on the board. And once again, the Milwaukee offense just falls short once again. I wasn't surprised that the Rangers swept the Rays. I thought that wasn't going to go 3 games. And then, the Twins and the Blue Jays, I really thought that one was going to go 3 as well. But we can talk about what happened in that series, but there were some things that really went wrong for the Blue Jays and they just couldn't recover. And the atmosphere in Minnesota was fantastic, and they definitely deserved those wins that they got.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that makes the wild card round very chaotic is that you're playing all 3 games in one destination, one location. And to me, that not exactly for a road team does it create disadvantages. Of course, if you're the Rangers, you played in Tampa Bay, of course, throughout the 3-game series. And again, the thing about Tampa Bay and the Rays and why I'm not surprised they're straight out after 2 games is let's be honest, they battled through adversity this season. Obviously, the Wander Franco thing doesn't help. But when you have everybody getting hurt offensively and you don't really have key contributors when it matters in this late season, to me, it's not going to get done. And also, the other thing about the Rays, at the end of the season, let's be honest, their pitching staff had a meltdown. They did not have a true starter late in this season. So for me, unfortunately, they were the odd man out in the American League of who's not going to go well. Surprisingly, I agreed with you as well. I thought the Twins Blue Jay series was going to go at least all 3. I really expected more out of the Toronto Blue Jays. I'm going to be honest with you. I felt that this was a year of progression. This team's been around the playoff picture every single year, just hasn't been able to progress. And unfortunately for the Blue Jays, it's another story where they make these additions, find ways to try to get better, and it's still not good enough to get through the wild card or the DS at all. But the Texas Rangers, let's talk about them briefly as we look forward now into the ALDS. It'll be the first game on Saturday, I think 1:03 p.m. if I'm not mistaken. It's the slated time. Very weird start times, by the way, every year for the division series. I don't understand why. We do 1:05 every year, and we have, I think, 1:03 tomorrow and 6:07 for the Philadelphia Phillies against the Atlanta Braves. But the Rangers, just an episode ago when we were talking with Eddie about who's going to be the odd team out. I thought it'd be the Seattle Mariners, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was the Texas Rangers. It looked like the Rangers, who controlled the AL West, and tell me where we've heard this before, another team in the NL East, the New York Mets, who are not in the playoffs this year, controlled the division from what felt like to start to finish, fell apart late, just to ultimately lose it all to the Houston Astros and was on the brink of falling out of playoff contention. Somehow, some way, the Rangers dominate their series and ultimately now face the best team in the American League, standing, in my opinion, of the Baltimore Orioles, who won the American League East. The only AL East team, by the way, still standing as of the moment in the playoffs. Obviously, the Orioles didn't have to play, so they're going to have a quote unquote more prepared rotation for this ALDS series where you only have to win 3 games. But what are our expectations from the Rangers? And could these 2 wins that they got to open up the wild card round maybe create some momentum for this team moving forward to prepare for this series?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest question about the Rangers was going to be, are their bats going to show up in the playoffs? Because when they started to slip in the AL West and lose that lead that they had, it was because the bats kind of sputtered after that lineup was doing so well earlier on in the summer. And I mean, the bats really woke up. I mean, they looked really good against Zach Eflin and Tyler Glass now. Those are two. I know we talked about, some of the injuries that Tampa had in their rotation, their pitching, but those are two really good pitchers, especially this season. Marcus Semien looked pretty good. He struggled a little bit in game 1, but in game 2 really woke up. Corey Seager looks like his MVP caliber self. Adolis Garcia looks pretty good again. How about the play of Evan Carter out in left field? I believe he went he reached base in 7 of 8 attempts in that wild card series. He was a huge boost in left field as the 21-year-old rookie. So he's going to probably be an X factor in that series in the ALDS, because while the strength of the Baltimore Orioles is their offense, they got some good pitchers too. Kyle Bradish, Dean Kramer, both look pretty good. Bradish kind of came out of nowhere and was an ERA monster this year. So I'm looking forward to how these bats look against what I think is probably a weaker rotation than they faced in Tampa. And I'm also interested to see how their bullpen holds up, because the bullpen has really been the weakness of this team for the entire season. They picked up Aroldis Chapman, and that really has not worked out very well at all. Jose Leclerc has kind of stepped into that closer role, done pretty well. Another guy to trust is Josh Spores. So we'll see how that bullpen goes, because October baseball, it's like, everything to the wall, all hands on deck. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but in that Toronto series, Jose Barrios, after there's 3 innings and 47 pitches, he's done. So I'm interested to see, how Bruce Bochy manages that bullpen and how he manages the starters as well, as to kind of balance out against a really strong Baltimore Orioles offense.
Is it scary to think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but is this the first playoff series for Baltimore we've seen since the extra inning meltdown with Buck Showalter, where he did not pitch Andrew Miller? I mean,
Yeah,
what am I saying? Andrew Miller, duh, not Yankees. Oh my gosh, I'm having a brain fart.
it was
Zach
Zach Britton.
Zach
Yeah.
Britton. Sorry, Andrew Miller. What am I saying? Either way, the point is, did not pitch Zach Britton first Orioles series. And by the way, Bradish is the officially announced starting pitcher for tomorrow for the Baltimore Orioles. Rangers, of course, they have, I believe, until like 3 hours before the game it is to announce theirs. Of course, we saw David Montgomery. David Montgomery. It's a halfback. I'm having such a horrible day today. Oh my goodness. Either way, Jordan Montgomery, there we go, former New York Yankee. I'm having a meltdown because we're not in the playoffs this year, as you could tell. But Jordan Montgomery, how about a great outing for him in the wild card? We're going to probably see him, I would imagine, game 2 or 3, based on how the off days set themselves out for the Rangers. We don't know who yet will be the established starter tomorrow. I would imagine I see. I don't know. I would imagine it would be whoever lines up at the number 3 spot for the Rangers. But the point is that either way, for the Texas Rangers, you started a disadvantage rotation wise, but your offense is going to have to carry the load. And to me, I think the bullpen, the big thing as well that we talked about this team during the trade deadline, getting some additions, trying to better themselves. You think they have the better bullpen? What does the Rangers have to do in the game 1 to, really get the upper edge on Baltimore? Because to me, I think it's going to have to be aggressive, being very aggressive pitching wise, and trust the fact that this team can score runs offensively.
Yeah, I think it's going to be, especially on offense, being aggressive, going station to station, because that's what they were so good at earlier on in the season. That's what they did so well against the Rays as well. It wasn't all they hit some home runs, but it wasn't all home runs. It was a lot of extra base hits, doubles, that kind of thing. So yeah, they're gonna have to do that again offensively, and um, I'm kind of blanking on the Rangers rotation, but yeah, we'll probably see Montgomery game 2 or 3 because he pitched on Tuesday. Wednesday, I'm assuming we won't see Eovaldi for until on Wednesday Eovaldi went, so I'm assuming we won't see him until at least game 2 or 3 also. So yeah, again, I'm kind of blanking on who's in that rotation because
Is it
obviously,
actually
well, Max Scherzer, he's hurt, so I doubt
hurt?
he'll
Right,
go.
right.
So yeah, that's the thing. I haven't done enough looking into their rotation to see who else will go. Because obviously they're down to Grom forever. They're down Scherzer for the playoffs. So yeah, that goes back to Bruce Bochy really having to do a lot with this bullpen, because if they have an unproven on the mound against a juggernaut offense, it could get ugly in a hurry. And Bruce Bochy really has to toe that line of, I can't let it get out of hand too quickly, but I also have to manage my bullpen so that we can last for the rest of this series. So that's why you hired the guy. He's won 3 World Series with the Giants, and now he's taken over this team. So that's going to be his job, is managing that bullpen through potential rotation struggles. As long as Montgomery and Eovaldi are solid, I think those 2 games where they start are definitely winnable, or even 3 if Montgomery goes game 5, potential game 5. But yeah, Bruce Bochy's biggest job here is going to be managing that bullpen, and the offense's job is to just stay on schedule, keep doing what they're doing, go station to station, get hits and get runs.
Is it fair to say, looking at the 4 game slate that will start tomorrow, is this the most exciting series of the 4? Because to me, you're talking about 2 teams that haven't been in the playoffs forever. Let's be honest, the Rangers in less than a season turned their narrative around, whereas Baltimore, as we've known, has slowly been progressing to get better. You saw it coming. Let's be honest, I don't think many saw it being this year, being the year where they took over the AL East, but nonetheless, they did. Is this the 2 teams that just stand out and say, man, this is going to be a great series that could go all 5 games?
I think I would put it at number 2. I think number one's got to be Phillies and Braves, especially after what happened last year. Red October, just the way that series is going to go again, the way that they're coming in. The Braves have one of the best team offensive seasons I've seen in a while. But yeah, I think this is a strong number 2 because, like you said, both of these teams have rebuilt. The Rangers basically did it in one season. The Orioles have been doing it over time. So we're finally getting to see, that those rebuilds come to fruition. And they're both, you've got a lot of star talent. You got a lot of likable guys. You got the team of rookies for the Orioles, and then you got Adley Rutschman as well. And then, you got Semien and Seager up the middle. Adolis Garcia is a fun guy to watch. So I think it's a lot of fun star talent to watch. And then obviously got Grayson Rodriguez on the mound too. He's probably going to go game 2. But I think it's really going to be fun to watch. I'll put that at number 2 behind Philly and Atlanta.
All right, so let's move to the next series in the ALDS that will start at 4:45 tomorrow on FS1. The Minnesota Twins, the Houston Astros. Let's be honest, there's probably not going to be a lot to talk about this series. I think everybody agrees that the Houston Astros will likely dominate this series, but nonetheless, the Minnesota Twins ultimately getting their much needed playoff win for the first time since 2005 in the wild card round. They're going to have to face former Cy Young Justin Verlander in game 1. When I look at this overall, right, the Twins, again, hit very well and produced very well in that wild card round. But when you're talking about facing Justin Verlander and ultimately a rotation backed up, I believe Framber Valdez as well, still healthy, right?
I
So
believe
I haven't
so.
I haven't paid much attention to the Astros going into the postseason, as crazy as it sounds. But I would imagine with that being your 1-2 combo, Houston's going to look very good to open up this series and likely put Minnesota in the brink of elimination if they don't bring out explosive offense early on in games. Because as we tend to know, especially with Justin Verlander here in game 1, the longer he goes, the better he gets. And that also helps the Houston bullpen, which still, surprise, surprise, even through all these World Series runs, still the weakness of the Houston Astros if you can get that far.
Yeah, I kind of like Minnesota's chances here. Um, they've come in really hot since the All-Star break. They've looked really good. Their hitting has gotten a lot better. And then, of course, you got Carlos Correa, who always shows up in the postseason. I'm sure Houston knows that no matter what. Um, I really think that Minnesota's got a good chance here. And I know Justin Verlander he won the Cy Young last year. He didn't look great this year. He looked pretty good. But I don't know. I just like I just like the juice that they're bringing here. Obviously the Astros lineup is always going to be pretty dangerous. You got Yordan Alvarez, you got another postseason riser in Jose Altuve. Alex Bregman's still there, even if he's not in his MVP form. And then you got, some new guys like Chad McCormick's looked really good. And other guys like that. So I I don't know. I don't think the Astros are going to dominate. They can still win, obviously, but I think it's going to go a really close 4 games or 5 games. Because I really like what the Twins are doing. Eduardo Julien and Royce Lewis have really come on as some big guys that have come through in the postseason in that series. Carlos Correa, like I said, always shows up no matter what. I'm interested to see if we'll get anything for Byron Buxton. I think is he still hurt? I think he's still hurt. I know he hasn't been
Uh,
playing center field.
well, that's the problem with Byron Buxton, unfortunately, and why he's considered for center field is the fact that he does regularly get hurt. I'm looking at least based on game 2, he did not play. So I believe Byron Buxton, yes, he's still hurt. Um, Overall, I will say this, you know, when I look at this Minnesota Twins roster, you know, let's be honest, the surprise of the year. And again, it's funny when we talk about the Twins, right? We talk about how good they've been offensively of years past. But when we look at the pitching staff, let's be honest, who expected Sonny Gray to have the season he's had this year? Obviously ends up being an all-star and so on. Gets a crucial victory. When I look at this rotation, though, it feels like, and we'll be talking about this in a couple moments about another series, but when I look at this rotation on paper going into the season, wasn't exactly the strongest. And you mentioned how good they've played in the second half of the season, but they've had a really good year overall. And you think about it like this: if Sonny Gray can actually pitch productively, of course, you're not going to see him game 1. But if he can pitch productively game 2, game 3, whatever it is, for this Minnesota Twins, you have to say he gives them a fair shot to, take a game or maybe even 2 for luck. If the Twins are lucky in this series, I will definitely give you that.
Yeah, I do think it's going to be more of a pitching matchup than people think, especially with the Astros offense have being notoriously like great. But yeah, honestly, I'm gonna go out on a limb here. And the last time I was on Sportspeak, it didn't go too well because I predicted UConn would lose in the first round of the NCAA tournament. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say the Twins take this series in 5 games. That's just my feeling right now. They're playing really well. They have a really good bullpen as well. Caleb Thielbar looked pretty good in a big spot. Johan Duran, everyone knows about him. He throws 103 and then he throws a 98-mile-an-hour splitter. That's just ridiculous. And then Griffin Jacks looks really good as that setup man. So I think they got a really dangerous 1, 2, 3 out of that bullpen. In addition, their starting rotation as well. Pablo Lopez, Sonny Gray, like you said. And then I feel like their offense just has that juice this year where they'll just come out of nowhere and just get some big hits at big times. I think they're going to take this series. I'm going to say Twins in 5 is my prediction.
See, that's bold. I don't know if I have the Twins winning. I have the Astros in 4. By the way, in the other series, I have Baltimore in 5 over the Texas Rangers. But also, I think the other thing, the last thing I'll say about this Astro series, um, that to me just makes it a little bit interesting to see for the on the end of Minnesota how aggressive they may get in terms of desperation with their starting pitchers. Where again, we don't know what's going to happen in game 1, but will we see a couple guys on 3 days rest, or even less to try to bolster the rotation and survive? I would imagine if they're down late in the series, that will be the case. But that's the only thing that stinks about the wild card round. Even if you've had a couple off days, right, and you swept your series, it's the fact that you will always be starting the series out with a disadvantage, which could go back to hurt you later because you know that you'll have to be pitching not exactly short-handed, but short-winded when it comes down to the nitty-gritty. Now let's move to the NL side. And to be honest with you, you mentioned this is probably going to be the most exciting series in not just the NL, but the entirety of the playoffs. The Philadelphia Phillies take on the Atlanta Braves. And we know how good the Braves offense is. We know how badly they want to beat Philadelphia in this ALDS. Arguably the best team in baseball on paper, having an explosive offensive year. Matt Olson, 50 plus home runs. You get the production as well from Ronald Acuna, who is arguably, without a doubt, this year's NL MVP. But the problem with the Braves is, and I can't believe I'd ever be saying this, is their starting rotation. Because the problem is you have two pitchers injured. Spencer Strider, of course, is your one going in, but it's basically you are relying on a 1, 4, and 5 in your rotation in this NLDS to open up. That's got to be a little bit worrisome if you're the Atlanta Braves because yes, your offense can carry you, but as we know, teams that win World Series have pitchers that pitch effectively when it matters. And I feel like that could be a little bit of a downfall for the Atlanta Braves in this series.
Yeah, I mean, that's where it gets interesting. This Braves rotation is kind of banged up. Max Fried should be able to go. It says he threw this week with a Band-Aid on. He's been dealing with like a blister or something on his finger. So I don't know how much that'll affect him or hinder him at all, if at all. Spencer Strider is your number one guy, obviously game one starter. I'm interested to see how he responds because last year he had a rough outing in that NLDS. And this year he's hasn't been the most consistent. His ERAs with like high threes, which when you look at some of his strikeout and walk numbers, you'd say, this guy's the best pitcher in baseball, but the guy just can't stop giving up runs. So it's going to be interesting to see how they handle him. We'll see how they handle, if it goes back to when it goes back to Philly, how they handle that environment because they played there last year and it didn't exactly go to plan. If we're looking at game 3, we'll probably see Bryce Elder going for Atlanta versus like either Wheeler or Nola. So Philly's definitely got the advantage there. Their offense is coming in real hot. They just diced up Miami's pitching staff. So there is a real possibility that the Phillies take this series again, but it's hard to bet against what the Braves have done this year, no matter what on offense. I just think even if their starting pitching struggles and is injured, I just think they just have too much offensively. It's going to be a very high scoring series, but I think the Braves are just too consistent on offense and have been all year. I think they're going to take this series, but it's not going to be easy by any stretch.
Yeah, but imagine Spencer Strider will be the game one starter as anticipated. However, no starting pitchers have been announced yet for this series. As for Philly, I mean, it's do or die, of course. You just played a 2-game wild card series. We talk about momentum, of course. We talked about it earlier. But if there's any team that eats, sleeps, and breathes the big moment, and as much as I hate to say it, because I hate the Philadelphia Phillies, I hate the city of Philadelphia in general. I think everybody knows that. However, with that being said, I feel like big moments is what it comes down for the Philadelphia Phillies, and you can't underrate them going into this playoff round because as much as they may not, outside of Nicholas Castellanos, who had a very good season offensively, as much as their averages may not appeal to you, as much as their offense with Trey Turner and so on have been underwhelming throughout this season, they've lived up in a big moment. They've swung the bat when it matters. They've hit home runs, especially when it matters. How often are we going to see Philadelphia maybe swing for the fences and hit a bunch of long balls throughout this series?
Yeah, I mean, when you're going up against Spencer Strider, he kind of has a propensity to give up the long ball this year. We could see him get shelled in game 1, honestly. And then, I still think even if that happens, I still think the Braves would win the series. But yeah, there's a legitimate chance that Spencer Strider just gives up like 3 or 4 home runs and just doesn't have it because some of his placement has been a little bit off. And when you only have 2 pitchers as a starting, when you only have 2 pitches as a starting pitcher, you kind of have to be perfect in your placement, and Strider has not been. So, yeah, I think they're going to hit a lot of home runs this series. Fried and Elder are not exactly home run guys, They're more like soft contact type guys. That's how they get their outs. That's also kind of how they struggle. So I think Strider's the place where they can really hit big with the home runs. But when it comes to guys like Freed and Elder, because Morton's probably not going to go, I think it's going to be a lot of stringing good hits together. Maybe not the flashy, sexy big home run that goes 450 feet, but it'll be, the rallies that just keep going single, single, double, single, just get runs across the board for the Phillies. So I think they have a couple chances to hit big, but I think it's going to be staying consistent on offense and just stringing together good at bats.
Who are you picking as the game one starter for Philadelphia? You think it's going to be Ranger Suarez or Taiwan Walker?
I think I would say Ranger Suarez. I think. I'm not sure how long the leash is for him because it feels like since they put him in that rotation, he's kind of hasn't given a ton of length. But if he's dealing, then obviously they're going to stick with him. But I'm interested in seeing how short his leash is with Rob Thompson and going to the bullpen. Because they have a really strong bullpen back half at least. You got Christopher Sanchez kind of come out of nowhere. Jose Alvarado and Seranthony Dominguez have been here before and performed last year in the postseason. So that's what I'm interested to see, especially in game one if Suarez is a starter or game two, if that's when he goes.
Yeah, well, either way, the Philadelphia Phillies offensively look relatively stacked as they did on paper to open up the year, and they're starting to hit what matters. By the way, in terms of my prediction for the series, I have the Braves winning it in four. However, it's a tight four overall. Three of these games will be one-run games when it comes down to the nitty-gritty, and I'm going to make an even bolder prediction. I have game one going 2 extra innings tomorrow, where the Braves win 3-2 in extras. By the way, the other thing we have to remember going into the postseason, this extra inning runner on second rule goes away. People forget about that because it's what happened last year because we're so used to relatively seeing a quick inversion of baseball when it gets to extra innings. It's back to natural baseball. I love that the most. It's not that I despise the extra inning rule. It's the fact that I truly think that it's mind-numbing the fact that the Yankees, for example, could have gotten no hit through 11 innings and could have lost or won a baseball game without getting a single hit. To me, granted, that didn't happen. They ended up winning 3-1. Ultimately, I don't remember what team that was against now that I think about it, but it
Was
was
that
earlier
the
on in the year.
was that the White Sox?
I want to say if no, I don't think it was the White Sox. I shouldn't say it was early on in the year. It was after the deadline. So it was later in the year.
I feel like that might
Um,
have been a White Sox game because I remember watching that. That was probably the last Yankee series I actually watched this year before I was like, all right, I'm done. I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, I'm having a brain fart. Which team it was? Either way, the point is the Yankees got no hit for 10 innings, ten
Yeah.
innings, and chance to win a game without a single hit. That's absolutely mind numbing. But I'm glad that baseball's back to its natural state for the postseason, and it makes every inning matter, makes every moment matter. But I think we're going to see extra innings. Prediction: 11 innings, 3-2. The Braves win over the Phillies in game number one. But there's one more series left as we head into the second round, or say second round, the second group of NLDS candidates, and that's the Arizona Diamondbacks taking on the Los Angeles Dodgers, who, let's be honest, it's been a little bit of a quiet season for the Dodgers this year, but they've been very good, of course, winning the West in the World Series picture. I kind of like this for the Dodgers, to be honest with you. Not just the matchup, but I like this for the Dodgers that when they're quiet, that's when they've done their most damage in the postseason in the past. And as much as we talk about the Atlanta Braves being good and the Phillies being, potential sneaks in this playoff, I think the Dodgers could be your underdog. And to be honest with you, I think this is the most underrated series of the group because you can't discredit how surprising the Arizona Diamondbacks have been this season as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think this is the most underrated series because of both teams, really. Like you said, the Dodgers have just quietly been a really good team. The trade deadline and the offseason of last year didn't really inspire a ton of confidence, but they've just done nothing but produce. Even when their rotation has had questions, they've just gone out and produced once again. Mookie Betts could win MVP in any other year. Freddie Freeman could win MVP in any other year. They're both having amazing seasons. I think Freddie Freeman was one double shy of having the first 60 double season in almost 100 years or something ridiculous like that. So, yeah, I mean, this team just goes along and does work. But at the same time, this Diamondbacks team is really exciting. They'll probably have Merrill Kelly go game one. I believe they'll have Zach Gallen go game two, and then they can go back to either that or they'll have Brandon Fott go game two, and then have Gallen for game three. That's up to Tori Lavulo. But I mean, this team is just really exciting. Obviously, Corbin Carroll's the star, the headliner, but they've got some really good pieces around him too. Hopefully, Gabby Moreno is okay. I know he took a bat to the head in that Brewers series, so hopefully he's okay. He's looked really good after that trade. Speaking of that trade, Lourdes Gurriel Jr. has been amazing as a Diamondback. They definitely won that trade, at least for now, because Dalton Varsho definitely struggled as a Blue Jay this year. But back to the Diamondbacks, they got some really fun guys that they can bring in. Their bullpens look pretty good too. You know, guys like Zach, I think his name is what's his name? I blanked on his name. They got him from the Rays. He has that funky delivery. I think it's Zach Thompson is his name. He just came in and got 2 holds. There's another guy who I'm also blanking on. Did
I
really
think
well with the bases loaded.
it's Ryan Thompson. That's what you're
Ryan
thinking
Thompson,
of.
that's his
Ryan
name.
Thompson.
Yeah. There's another guy who's like from Indiana who name is escaping me because I hadn't heard of him before this series. The bases loaded, no deal, no big deal, just gets 2 outs. And you got guys like Joe Mintz who was an all-star last year. And then they got Paul Sewald, who has suddenly become one of the best closers in the game after, of course, leaving the Mets. But yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of fun guys. And if Zach Gallen can pitch like his Cy Young form, like he has been for most of the season, I think they're in a good spot here because, you know, this Dodger rotation is a little bit troubled right now. And then they kind of have been all year. They haven't had the same success. Clayton Kershaw still looks pretty good, but he's getting up there in age and he hasn't thrown as many innings as he has in years past. That bullpen's still really good, though. Evan Phillips, Bruce Dark are all guys to look out for, of course. You got guys like Bobby Miller, who you got some really good young guns in that rotation, but they're unproven. So I think this is going to be a really sneaky good series. I think it goes all 5 games just out of the fact that the Diamondbacks are just relentless. They're young. They're fun. The Dodgers are a juggernaut, but I think the Diamondbacks are going to keep it close, but the Dodgers, I think, are going to move on.
Who would have thought a team that had Evan Longoria starting as its third baseman would be in the playoff picture going for a World Series hunt? It's crazy to think that we haven't talked about Longo in a very, very long time being on a productive team. Think about when he was on the Giants. They didn't really do much while he was there. But the Arizona Diamondbacks, as you mentioned, young and exciting. And I think the other picture I think you're thinking of is it Ginkle, maybe you're thinking of?
He's one of them. There's another guy. I'm going to find his name.
Out of the bullpen. Either way, they have Miguel Castro as well, who I felt was a really good addition in the bullpen for this Giants, goodness, Diamondbacks team overall. And again, I think you mentioned Gurriel's looked very exciting. Christian Walker as well, very solid first baseman. Love what he does. Cal Marte, arguably one of the best switch hitters in baseball. Overall, and of course you can't forget about the young Corbin Carroll. But overall, when I look at this Diamondbacks team, you kind of mentioned it a few moments ago. The starting pitching will set the tone. If Gowan is great, if Merrill Kelly is great, this team will go long because their starters, unlike Los Angeles, can go distances. The only one that we could say that is Clayton Kershaw, who, by the way, is the game one starter unofficially for the Dodgers. That is announced. We don't know who the Diamondbacks is. Again, we assume it's going to be Merrill Kelly. However, either way, the point is this for the Arizona Diamondbacks. If you can get longevity, if you can get consistent pitching, and the other thing, too, I'll say about this as well, Alec, you have to remember, we're in 2 very pitcher-friendly ballparks, which means I would not expect there to be a lot of scoring throughout these games. And if you want to come down to this, and I don't really tend to say this a lot, but this may just be a series, as much as we talk about the young, explosive offenses, this may be the series where defense comes to matter the most, just because of the fact of the ballparks we're playing. And that's where the youth comes to stand out. And you know, it's funny, I mentioned a 5-game series earlier of what I think would ultimately be. I think this is a series that has potential to go 5, especially once you get past pitcher one for the Dodgers of Clayton Kershaw. And man, it's funny because I said, it's an underwhelming year. This is where the Dodgers tend to do damage when they're looked a little bit under the radar. But I think the Diamondbacks can do this. I think the Diamondbacks can win this series in 5 games. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I think the Dodgers are just too good. Also, I did find the guy that I was looking for. His name is I lost it. His name is Andrew Saalfrank. That's who I was looking for. Yeah, I was watching the Brewers game. He just came in, got 2 outs with the bases loaded. No big deal. So I would not be surprised at all if the Diamondbacks pull this out. I just think the star power of the Dodgers is going to win over. Mookie's going to come in huge no matter where he plays in the field. Freddie Freeman's going to be his usual excellent self. But I would not be surprised if the Diamondbacks take this. I just think the Dodgers will. I think we both agree that it has the potential to go 5, and we both think it will. I say Dodgers. You say Diamondbacks.
Yeah, I think Diamondbacks could be a sneak because you have to remember every postseason has a surprise to it too. Every year, that's what it's felt like for the last 3 or 4 years. Of course, last year it was the Phillies. A few seasons before it was the Atlanta Braves. The point is that I think the Diamondbacks will be your surprise team. Don't have them go to the World Series, but how about before we wrap things up here in this episode today of 151 of Sports Speak, let's talk about the rest of the postseason now, because the way we set things up overall, just to double clarify and correct me if I am wrong, we have the Orioles winning the ALDS, right? We have the Astros or I forget who you had, the Astros as well, right?
I said the Twins.
Twins. I'm sorry. So
I
you have the
went bold.
Twins. So your ALCS is the Orioles and the Twins. I have the Orioles and the Astros. You have Atlanta, right? Or is it so you have Atlanta and then you have the Dodgers, whereas I have Atlanta and the Diamondbacks. Who goes to the World Series in your opinion on the AL side?
It's gonna after all the chaos that we've talked about today, it's gonna be chalky, but I say it's gonna be the Orioles and the Braves. I think it's the 1 and the 1. And in that World Series, it's gonna be insanely exciting. Two great offensive teams against two, I don't want to say so, but maybe a little bit banged up or a little bit not even underachieving. Two okay rotations. But I think the Braves are gonna win it. They're just too good, in my opinion, this year. I think even if their starting pitching struggles, I said this in the prediction about the Philly series. Their offense is just too good to get stopped, especially without Felix Bautista. That's going to be a huge blow to that bullpen. They got Shintaro Fujinami in the trade deadline. I think he's been pretty good. Yennier Cano is going to have to be that closer. But I think in late in games, they're just too talented of an offensive team. And I think the Braves bullpen is pretty good, in pretty good shape. They got Raisel Iglesias again. I think the Braves are going to win this World Series, and I think it'll go 6 games.
I ultimately think it'll be, I don't want to say a quote unquote stale World Series, but it'll be two teams that nobody surprises in a World Series. And that'll be the Houston Astros taking on the Atlanta Braves. I have the Braves beating the defending World Series champions in 6 games as well. And again, listen, I just truthfully think for the Atlanta Braves this year, listen, if they lose, they lose, but it would be absolutely devastating if they don't win a World Series this year. Compared to their last World Series win where nobody saw it coming, this team throughout the year has been consistent as can be. If the Rays didn't get off to such a hot start, it would have been arguably the best starting team in baseball, would have been the best, most consistent team in baseball. And the Braves have done everything this year in their power to be the most dominant team in baseball, outside the fact, of course, of win that coveted World Series. To me, I think the Braves can get it done. And it's devastation if they don't. But I think we'll close it off with that ultimately, I think the Atlanta Braves can be and should be World Series champions. And again, the Astros, let's be honest, it's not a World Series, it feels like, without them at this point in the
Yeah.
AL side. Opinion, as good as the Orioles have had this year, season wise, the Astros still kind of control the AL. You have to prove me wrong until they stop playing offense, which, by the way, one thing that I absolutely love about this AL NL DS going into this week, every team you can look up and down is great offensively. And the fact that on paper, statistically speaking, the Phillies is the weakest of the bunch tells you a lot because they are a decent offensive team. And that to me is the most exciting part of what makes playoffs and postseason baseball so dramatic, because it will tell those stories with the big moments. However, Alec, I do want to thank you coming on here this afternoon on episode 151 of Sports Speak. By the way, I don't know if Eddie did this to you the last time you were on when we were talking about March Madness, but Of course, as you are a common contributor here on SportsSpeak, you'll find us on sportspeak.com through Wix. However, where can everybody find you on social media?
Yeah, so on Twitter, you can find me at AlexCR12. I have a lot of interesting things going on there, a lot of Rutgers, of course. Big Seahawks fan, so you see that too, and Yankees. So yeah, that's where you can find me on Twitter. Yeah, that's where I do a lot of stuff.
And of course, it's been a very interesting fantasy football season for you. How you feeling? Everybody's getting hurt.
Yeah, it's not great. Thankfully, I have the win over Adam, so that I guess as long as I'm sticking with him in the record race, that keeps me out of the basement, so that's good. Yeah, losing Nick Chubb really hurt. I was also without Anthony Richardson for a week. That also really hurt. Aaron Jones came back and was not very good, so I thought my team was really solid on paper, and then the injuries hit. But I believe in my squad. I think we have the talent to make some kind of push for hopefully not last place, but it hasn't been a great start. But it's not how you start; it's how you finish.
Well, I definitely didn't think I was winning this week, and then DJ Moore put up 49 points yesterday, so I think I have a good chance against Brett. However, that's going to wrap things up here from episode 151 of SportsSpeak. A reminder that you can use promo code SportsSpeak at checkout, virtue of SeatGeek, for 20% off for new users. However, with that being said, I've been Tim Moore saying so long from episode 151. We'll pick things back up with Eddie for episode 152 when we come back next week here on SportsSpeak. Have a good one.